All right, we are here with Bobak Ha'Eri of our CFB, the subreddit that is what they call the internet's tailgate. Welcome, Bob, back to the show.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. 4.4 million fans, the top 1% of subreddits. What is it about this website, if you want to call it a website, that just attracts so many college football maniacs?
That's a great question. So our CFB's been around for about a little over 15 years, and organically it grows. It's just an opportunity for fans of all teams to kind of have as civil as you can get in college football discussion, but just an opportunity to get together. It's fun. Every time there's a big game, there's always a game thread. People can kind of gather, fans of teams, neutrals. The one thing that's nice about college football is there's so many fan bases. And granted, you could say, like, yeah, there's the P2 and all of that stuff. But there's so many fan bases that once you get a lot of people together, and we're the biggest forum right now on the internet, as it turned out. We're the biggest community of college football fans.
Yeah.
You get a kind of, it self-polices itself. I say that knowing that, there's a team of us, about 30 of us, that help kind of moderate the discussion and keep things from getting out of hand. But I think because it's a place for people to have fun. It celebrates what makes college football enjoyable. And I think that's what keeps people coming back.
Yeah. And you are the editor of the subreddit, or one of the editors. What is your responsibility and how did you get into that role?
Yeah, my goodness. So I would say we're kind of a group of equals in that sense. There's a group of moderators, roughly a little bit under 30 of us. I've been there. I'm probably the second longest tenured person there. And the editor role comes from the fact that about 10 years ago, we started also doing our own original reporting with editorial oversight. And that's where I stepped in. We have about 30 people in any given year who report around. It's so funny in college football. This is a modest number if you know college football, about 100 games. So that's a very modest number. But usually, the last 7 national championships and all of that stuff. But all of that said, as a group, there's so many aspects to the site. We do things like we have our own fan poll. We have, a lot of creative ideas that go into it. And then frankly, a lot of people that do the tech work on the back end of it. So we're a community and we kind of put that together, and each person, we're active. Sometimes I always use the analogy, if you've ever done nonprofit work, sometimes you get on a board and it's a do nothing board. We're not a do nothing group. And I got into it. I remember I can remember when I first started using the website because my oldest child was born, and my wife and I, we slept in shifts. This is a while ago. He's going to turn 14 soon enough. And, every night I would stay up the first kind of shift up until like 2 a.m. because I'm a night owl, and, be sleeping on your shoulder, all of that stuff. And like, what am I going to watch? And this is in November. So I'm like, all right, midweek Maction, whatever game, Sun Belt, Fun Belt, and I would just find a place like, where can I vent when I'm sitting here with a baby on one shoulder that I can like type something out. And then that's when I found the subreddit, and I ended up being active enough. And I helped with web forums before, right? This is just, it seemed like a fun opportunity. I liked the vibe. People were very nice, and, humor was always appreciated. And I think of myself as a somewhat humorous person. And yeah, just from there, it ended up like we did a fundraiser. I helped out. I mean, I'm a lawyer by background. I'm like, I can make sure that the money gets where it needs to go. And then somebody said, you're responsible. You want to be part of the team? I'm like, yeah. We don't do it that way anymore. Now it's way more formal. I mean, that was when there were like 30,000 people on the subreddit. Now there's, as you said, 4.4 million, which is wild to think of.
Yeah. I look at forums for college football across the internet, and they all have their different flavors and their different styles. And some are a little bit like ghost towns, depending on the school. And some of them are wild, rollicking places. Seems like the CFB subreddit, it feels like the big leagues of message boards. Like you go do your time on your team board, but if you come over to that site, you got to bring your A game, right?
You have to know how to talk to people in some regard. I think you've hit on something. I mean, I'm of a vintage where I didn't grow up with the internet. Like I got it in college, and then, I mean, I knew of it, but I didn't really have it in any kind of personal way. So when I found forums, you find your voice. You know that there's certain ways you shouldn't talk to people. And some places encourage that. Some places, I mean, I've been on plenty of team boards. My undergraduate. I'm a USC Trojan, so I've been to plenty of USC boards.
Hmm.
And I mean, back in the day, I remember some were more, you know, enjoyable than others. But it can be tough when you get a very insular group of people because then you get, people who are super like the team can do no wrong. People who are doomsayers.
Yeah.
So when you visit a forum like RCFB, you get a group of people. So you can't, some of the things that might be tolerated on a sub, I should say on a forum more team based, you get called out for it. And I mean, our nature is, and I'd say the culture there is, I kind of hinted at. It's like fun if you can poke fun at yourself, if you can have joy, if you can feel like good for other people. And I mean, don't get me wrong, if you can still like, if you know how to, okay, I went to Catholic high school, right? I used to write plays. There was a line you didn't cross. You always knew if you wrote a play, there's a line you never crossed, and I was always good at that. So if you know, like, okay, there's a line where, okay, you can't take it too far, then it works well if you go into a website like
Yeah.
RCFB. So I think that's kind of been the vibe that we have in terms of trying to get a character of the site and kind of how it's developed organically over time. And that's the thing, like, I'm not going to say we have created that. It's just kind of, that's the way the culture developed. I mean, that's what attracted me to it, and that's
Hmm.
what's continued on.
Yeah. The whole development of it is fascinating to me because back when I worked at USC in the athletic department, worked in sports information department in the Pete, Paul Hackett, Pete Carroll era, about an 8 year period. And back then, traditional media was still the way things were going, and people on message boards were looked at as like unwashed masses, the people who were just uh, nutty fans who didn't have perspective on things and didn't know how things were going. There was a little bit of a, there's a haughtiness as to how things were approached. But now you can't argue with 4.4 million fans because, I mean, you're not going to find a single media outlet that is covering college football that is going to have those kinds of numbers. So now I feel like the inmates have taken over the asylum, so to speak. But what's great about your subreddit is that it's it's not like what they were worried about, which is that if the inmates take over the asylum, it's going to be just a bunch of nonsense and idiocy. Now you obviously have, there's always going to be some nonsense and idiocy because it's college football, but there's
Of course.
serious discussion on these sites, and you're going to get excellent analysis and from these sites that are, you're going to find more like objective analysis on your site than you're going to find on a fan site, or I think even on a traditional media site, because in some cases certain media people they have to sort of couch what they're saying, and because they want access to who they're talking to, that kind of thing. It seems to me that the subreddit just brings in the very best of the best, and you get as close as you can to some objective analysis in college football.
Well, Chris, you touched on some really, I think, big macro level things that we always deal with. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember there was a time where you just didn't want to say like, oh yeah, I use the internet to. Can you imagine, like, there was a time, and it's so weird to even think loud. You talk to the younger people, because I teach an undergraduate class and I used to teach in law school, and you talk to younger people, and the idea of meeting somebody through an app or online doesn't seem weird to them. Like, I remember when that would have been still pretty strange,
Yeah.
Like, there were whole movies, rom-coms about how weird these two people met online.
Yeah.
So kind of, especially people who grew up in the 80s and 90s and before that, they see, and we've dealt with that because I mentioned, we've had our own media kind of team. And you're always dealing with that, like, are we sending a fan into the press box? And I get that concern. But some of the younger programs, I think, and some of the smaller programs absolutely do embrace the fact that, okay, yeah, RCFB, they have their wild edges, but we think they're going to be serious enough to take this seriously. And some will engage us, not only, I'm not talking just the press stuff, but like we've been engaged by a couple of teams to do, social media takeovers. Because we have a fairly successful X account of a little over 300 and I think 370,000 right now.
Hmm.
The Blue Sky, the Instagram, all of that stuff, right? So we've engaged with some of them. We love the bowl games. I mean, before there was The Pop-Tart Bowl, love those people. The people who market that are fantastic. But the Belk Bowl walked so they could run. And now
Yeah.
they're the Duke's Mayo Bowl. But I love Miller Yoho over at there and that crew. And they were the ones that realized, like, there's a billion bowls right now. How do we separate themselves? So they would engage with the subreddit, do like an Ask Me Anything, an AMA, and kind of pretend to be like a bowl game entity, and
Hmm.
something like that. So I think some of the wiser programs have embraced it because you've hit the nail on the head. I love traditional media. I mean, I am still a New York Times subscriber. I got rid of the physical paper only because they wouldn't deliver it to where I lived at some point. I used to read the LA Times. I used to read. Oh, gosh, I grew up in the armpit of California,
Yeah.
Bakersfield, but the Bakersfield Californian. And I mean, I used to read these things, right? So, and now it's like, I know that, especially for some of the smaller entities, smaller papers, that the subscriber count isn't that. And then I always feel odd because we're competing with 4.4 million subscribers. And during the season, our traffic is way beyond that because you don't have to
Sure.
subscribe to be part of
Sure.
or even, reply. And I'm just kind of like, how do they not? They choose to ignore where people are getting their news from. People are getting their news from, ESPN, Fox, all the major sports networks, absolutely. Maybe more their websites and apps and even terrestrial television anymore. But I've noticed people will just say, oh, wow, I had no idea this was a story because they see it aggregate on our CFB. And some of our own people will report things, but most of the time it's just people creating a post. And also, as you said, like analysis, like, hey, I've been noticing that this team, I was actually just reading a post on Eastern Michigan. Like, who on earth is going to go out and do a report on the Eastern Michigan Eagles
Yeah.
other than someone who's really passionate about the team and made some incredible points about the two questions he thought the team had moving forward. So that's again what we are. And I get it. It's sort of strange, I think, for some of the more, especially the more legacy sports information departments to get their mind around it. And I mean, it's funny too because they're going to eventually have to understand. And I do get the concern. I'm almost scared to think, like, are we going to get to the point where they have to invite influencers in to cover games? Like, I don't want to see that point. No one wants to see that
Yeah.
point. But at the same time, there is that kind of, there's going to be sites like ours that are neither fish nor foul. And what do you do with them? Because what's left?
Yeah.
What's left? I mean, so I feel bad. Like, for example, Pacific Northwest, they have such exciting college football right now. And they've had for a long time, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But it's like it's eroding up there, the college
Hmm.
football coverage that they get for the local fans. And people have to be able to step up and help fill that role to get people information. And frankly, I'm not stupid. We could never match what a proper beat reporter could do, what someone who is doing professional journalism at a full-time career could do. But it's like at the same time, there's got to be people that can fill in the stopgaps, and the news that gets aggregated on our CFB, the analysis that users create, and even the reports they create are part of this shift, which has been kind of starting to reach a critical mass as we see
Hmm.
the erosion, I think, of the traditional media.
Yeah. A couple things that you brought up in that last uh,
Rant.
rant. Yeah, I was trying to think what is.
Ramble,
I
whatever.
was trying to think what is a better phrase. No, because there's all kinds of things I was taking note of, and just one of the things I wanted to ask about is you mentioned the Pacific Northwest, and in a sense, it looks to me that college football is. I don't want to use the term withering on the West Coast or on the East Coast compared to the Midwest and the South. Basically, college football is becoming an SEC Big Ten
Hmm.
community exercise, and I'm sure you see it in your traffic, right? I'm sure you look at the traffic and you see that there's a bunch of people from over here in the country, and there's a bunch of people from over here in the country, and there's a little bit of people on the sides, right? Is that what you see, or and how do you start to get people interested on the coasts in this sport?
I think that's one of the remarkable things. We tend not to see, I mean, the schools that have the biggest fan bases aren't surprising. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, for the longest time, number one and number two were, even when they weren't particularly great, Michigan and Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they have huge fan bases, maybe they're more tech savvy. I mean, that is the original flaw of a community like our CFB, most of our users will tend to be slightly younger and more tech savvy.
Hmm.
But the problem is each year that goes by, the other end of that scale is fading away. So
Yeah.
it's becoming more, not only the middle, it's becoming the bulk.
Hmm.
But all of that said, I've noticed that, Oregon fans, healthy amount of Oregon fans on our CFB. USC fans, I know USC fans, they show up when the team's doing well. It's like Miami fans. It's like, hey,
Hmm.
now they're all over the
Yep.
website.
Yep.
If the team doesn't do so good, they evaporate, but that's the nature of Los Angeles or Miami or some of the major cities. So I would say, despite this erosion in coverage, the fans we see match the fans that are doing well, and that makes sense.
Hmm.
They will step up when they're doing well. You saw a lot more Boise State fans at the beginning of this season than already 2 weeks in. But they still show up because they're not only hardcore is always, I don't want to use that term because it sometimes sounds a little bit derogatory. I mean, but the serious fans do still show up because they know, like, Boise State's Gooses and Cook, there's still a future for the team. They can still even get into the playoff under some certain circumstances. Um, so we see that. Like, again, more SEC, more Big Ten fans, certainly, but that's just the nature of how many there are. I mean, we still see fans. I'm always excited when I see fans of schools of, like Division 3, Division 2, and AIA when they show up. And then, granted, the conversation tends to mostly pool around the biggest stories,
Hmm.
but always a nice thing of a website like RCFB is because there isn't, and I mean, I don't in any way cast aspersions on this, but when we're not chasing clicks, we can just say, okay, what do you guys want to talk about? And what
Yeah.
sometimes stories percolate up that have no coverage outside of maybe a local TV paper or somebody just noticed something, and then that becomes a bigger conversation.
Hmm.
But in terms of, I'd say, you made me really think about this because as I was talking about the erosion of the Pacific Northwest news, it's not like Oregon fans have dried up, or Oregon State fans, or Wazoo, or Washington, or any of the fans in that region have just dried up. It's just it's unrelated. If anything, it's more of the larger kind of macro level of like newspapers in general as news gathering sites, and the sports department is kind of usually one of the few things that people are even reading the paper for are getting brought down with that. And I think
Hmm.
that would be how I'd characterize it, perhaps a bit more than there aren't the fans. The fans
Yeah.
are certainly there.
Yeah. The other thing was that I think it would be very easy for you guys. You have a lot of memes on your site. You have a lot of, it's sort of a big part of college football is like this inherent snarkiness and the irony and the satire, but you're also very serious stewards of the sport, which is just great to see. You're talking about all the teams equally. You don't have any, there's no obvious, like, you're not doing the clickbait thing, right? As much. Some things just naturally happen. How do you balance the whole, we don't want to memify things too much, but memes are good because if we boil things down to memes, then we start getting to the it's all emotion, right? It's all about,
Yeah, it becomes like
stirring
almost like
emotions.
a becomes almost like a nonsense symbolic language.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with you. So there's actually a couple of ways to look at this. So early on, we tried to structure it so that a weekly post, the posts are what comprise all the different items on our CFB at a given time. So the post will have a weekly post to kind of corral everything, like Meme Monday or Trash Talk Thursday, where we've even set it so it automatically turns everybody's words into all caps because all caps is cruise control for cool, right?
That is
But no, I
awesome.
mean it's so by corralling it to those spots, you kind of allow actually it's kind of nice because then you get a concentrated version of it and you get a little bit more development of it. And then we created sort of what we call like sister subreddits, like RCFB memes. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
you can go there all the time, and they actually slightly get their own culture, but they're delightful, and they kind of self-police. But you're right, in terms of the main subreddit, um, we don't have to do too much once we kind of created this, like, okay, that goes in the weekly post. And then luckily, other users become part of the, not police force is the wrong word, but like they get it. They help
Mm-hmm.
enforce it. They say like, this is the wrong place. They usually hit report on it. So we find out about it immediately. And then, polite, like, hey, move over here. It's never like, you don't want to make it like punitive, but you want to make it so that people kind of get the gist of how it goes. And to some extent, in conversations in any message board, um, especially once we got to be the size of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, there is a certain bit of conversation that does tend to reward the top, because the way, for those who are not familiar with Reddit, I should kind of explain this. The way it works is people can up or downvote an item, and then that kind of creates how prominent it appears on the page. And within each post, there's a very, very active comment section. And that's what people usually come for, oddly enough. I would say people come more for the comment section than they do the posts themselves because they want to talk about a topic.
Hmm.
We always joke like, come on, at least read the article. I mean,
Right.
please. But our game posts, live game posts, and post game discussions are by far the biggest. I mean, sometimes over a game it'll be 40,000 comments, and we start to actually crack Reddit a little bit in their
It's
ability to
wild.
to host a yeah. Oh yeah. We have to split the national championship into quarters because it just won't work
Yeah.
otherwise. All that said, so the upvote downvote does tend to reward a little bit of the meme culture, so to speak.
Hmm.
So sometimes the first two or three on a very popular topic might be either a really funny joke. I mean, honestly, some of them I wish I had the aggregate humor that the website has sometimes. Or, but then, there is usually an equal chance for something quite insightful. And if it isn't number one, it might be number two or number three. But you get that nice balance. And honestly, unless it becomes an abusive meme, and there's been a handful over the years, I'm not going to single any of them out, then, there's ways you can kind of corral those in other ways, using kind of a website to sort of mark those words when they show up for review. But we've luckily never had to do that. There's been one or two like basement level things that honestly aren't even memes. They're just sayings. I mean, there's a few teams that have slogans that other teams like to use on them.
Right.
But that's the nature of the beast, and you do what you can to do it. And as long as you can accept the fact that there will be errors and you can just move past them, that's a wonderful thing about running a website like this.
Sure, sure. Now, can you share a moment where something that started on our CFB, whether a meme or a campaign or a fan narrative, ended up breaking out into the wider college football world?
There have been a few of those, and I want to say I think this one may have started oddly enough on, I think they're now the Shutdown Fullcast group. One of their writers came up with the idea of the surrender cobra. The idea of, when a game is going lost, you get the person back of their head, hands on the back of their head. And that became super popular in our CFB to the point where, and we've known this, we have good relations, I want to say, with College Football Game Day. Um, at one point, they started to pick up on it too. So sometimes we've joked like, oh, there's now this segment they do on the College Football Game Day. I'm like, oh, did they take that from our Twitter? Did they take that from our forum? We've kind of like joked about like, where is
Yeah.
this? Where have these things been sourced from? But that one is one. But yeah, just occasionally, like some of these jokes pop their way into the wild, and like sometimes people will do things for our CFB, and then we've found that some of the other websites will hire them because we don't have a budget. Everyone who does anything for us is a volunteer, and I mean, anytime that happens, we're just like, awesome, that's great. Like, how can you get mad at someone doing something on RCFB or a place where they're doing it for a passion? Because I remember back in the day, even on a USC forum, I think there was somebody I remember who was writing incredible, insightful analysis, and then one of the websites straight up hired him.
Uh,
You love to see that kind of thing,
sure.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That I imagine that happens all over college football from time to time, where in this internet age, the cream rises to the top. You can get involved in commentary in ways that you couldn't before. Um, okay, so now as media rights keep consolidating and fans face more barriers to those acts, people don't want to pay, unfortunately, for media, right? And so, especially like I find myself, if I want to read a single story about something on the Houston Chronicle, I just don't want to, I don't want to pay for a subscription just to read the one story. So, do you see Reddit and other fan communities filling in the coverage gaps? Is that what
Oh,
makes them so
100%.
popular? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of times, for example, people will bring up a topic, and some people who are and I'm not saying like we have a 100% intolerance of like copy pasting paywalled articles. That's just
Hmm.
unethical. We don't believe in it. But sometimes people will come in and say like, oh yeah, I was reading the discussion about this, and they'll use what they read to add to the discussion on a certain topic. And certainly, there's sometimes lighter versions of those stories that get, you know, the way the news aggregate, the way some of the other news sites do, and they kind of and I feel bad because I don't like how some of those sites, and I, to an extent, we are part of that problem.
Mm,
But I certainly don't like sites that are earning money off of regurgitating another long form story and
right.
taking a choice quote out of it. But certainly, I would say, for example, X and to a lesser extent, Blue Sky have become one of the ways people kind of bring up a topic. Because sometimes the person will post the story on their X, or the author will, and then some people who can click through can click on it. Others can't. But what at least it does is gets that conversation started, and then you get some of the people who might be more insightful on what's going on that particular team chiming in. That's certainly part of the ecosystem that is quite prevalent now, I would
Right.
say.
Well, one of the things I've been trying to gauge in recent years, because it's been, you know, massive changes going on in college football, as we all know. I'm really curious what the rank and file, what the grassroots people think about a lot of these changes. In my personal life, anecdotally, the old timers were not big fans of it, but we just got to deal with it, right? Um, and I have a theory that one reason you're seeing an increase in, for example, television ratings for the playoffs or for even for the season, I have a pet theory that a lot of that is because of the increase in prop betting and betting in general in college football. So people have more reason to watch games. Like there's more loosely connected fans than hardcore fans. Like they've traded, they've dropped some hardcore fans and increased the sort of looser affiliated fans, sort of like in the NFL where you have people who only watch the NFL for their fantasy team kind of thing. And so that goes into the ratings and it helps the ratings, but are they how much are they really fans of a team, right? As opposed to, I want my player to do well. Um, you see all this stuff on a daily basis, you see what everybody has to say. In your assessment, is are they taking all these changes in stride? Or what's popular as far as the changes? What's unpopular? And has the composition of the fan base changed as far as you can tell?
That's a great question because I think there is what people say versus what people do, and there's what people will, soapbox for versus in their heart of hearts how they really feel it, or how much does it really bother them. And I say that because, across the board, college football is as healthy as ever in terms of the people watching and all of that stuff. And bets certainly are part of it. You could also, argue the Dion effect, now the Belichick effect. People
Mm-hmm.
neutrals are also kind of being brought into it a little bit. I still remember covering a game here in the Twin Cities, and the person that was just showing me the way wanted to talk about Deion Sanders in like the second it was his first week
Mm-hmm.
there, and I'm like, this is amazing. This person I can tell has zero interest in college football but wants to talk Deion, and I think that's awesome for the record. Um, and so with things like, especially the portal, initially was people were enamored by the portal at first. I think just the name portal,
Little
especially to maybe
Star Trek action
a
going
little
on.
Star
Yeah.
Trek that
Yeah.
there was there was a very popular game for a while called Portal. Like people thought that was neat, and then and it was funny too because before NIL, people were always like, oh, it's a shame they don't pay the players, da da da, and
Yeah.
then now they're like, oh, not like that. I'm like,
Well, they're paying him too
come on,
much. What's going on?
yeah,
Yeah.
come on, man, like there's people here in this sport who could get injured critically, in ways that could just knock out their career or worse.
Or worse. Yeah.
Like let them get the money while they can, dear heavens. But all of that said, certainly I've seen whenever some of these posts come up, the most popular, most popular, I should say, the least liked topic that comes up, but people love to talk about it, is anything that talks about kind of the consolidation of power to the P2, and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that money is driving everything. It's like Wu-Tang Cream, like
You're
cash
right.
rules everything around me, right?
Yeah. Private equity.
It's
Yeah.
exactly. And I think, oh, private equity, my goodness. So you'll always get the highly upvoted top comment will be decrying the state of college football, And kind of the joke is some of them will then end it with, "All right, see you all next week." And I think that's the issue here. Now, betting too is an issue. It's remarkable because we get both sides of that a lot. We get people who are clearly worried about how, to an extent, it can prey on those with an issue with gambling addiction.
Hmm.
Um, Full disclosure, not this season, but for 3 seasons, we had a sponsorship with DraftKings, which we used to just pay for charity. So I mean, hey. But at the same time, I mean, we knew that this is a serious thing. But even before gambling was legalized, everyone loved to know the spread. All the gambling terminology was still important because people wanted to be able to benchmark how their team was supposedly doing based on what some folks in the desert think they should do.
But now you have like ESPN talking about spreads. It's a little bit more ingrained into the coverage now, right?
Oh, I mean, some of the schools now have whole big licenses with it, like Caesars Gamble. I'm waiting for the permission one of them's going to get to like name their stadium that or
Right.
something like
It's
that,
just a matter of time, right?
FanDuel's Arena or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have like a moral problem with it, but I'm just trying to gauge is are we selling like is it short termism, right? Like, because if you're looking long term, you want to cultivate the fan base to enjoy the things that make college football unique. And if it's just this sort of like a money oriented focus, right? Or we're bringing people in for that. Like, how do you balance that all that out, right? Looking
I mean,
forward.
when you think about it, do we want it explicit like it is now, where it is absolutely no veil on top of it? This is all about cash versus the old days where it always felt disingenuous when administrators who were making incredible amounts of money themselves, and obviously it's well known that for the longest time, many of the highest paid public officials were college football or in some cases college basketball coaches. Yet the players were, oftentimes kind of so it's this question of like, oh wow, you built a $100 million sports facility, and people were decrying that, and now it's just basically like, yeah, no, it is about money. We're trying to compete with the Joneses. Now we have revenue share.
Yeah.
Now we have limits on NIL for however many lawsuit challenges it'll survive for. I mean, it's just kind of, I mean, kind of going to one of the things that certainly you hear some fans complain about, and understandably some fan bases more than others, is the 1-2 punch of the transfer portal and NIL inducing players to get paid more. I I get that. I get it's upsetting, but at the same time, when I think of, would I rather these players get the benefit knowing that their careers could end at any time? So I think on our CFB, we certainly get the full mix. I'm not in any sense, I want to say like the representing the majority there, but there
Yeah.
is more of a fractional. It isn't. I like the fact that there is a multiplicity of views on the topic, and you don't necessarily get completely bogged down in this is evil. College football is over. What you were kind of talking about at the very beginning. But
Right.
certainly, I'm sure there's some people that there's always that person like, oh, I really stopped caring. And part of us are like, why are you on a subreddit commenting about college football if you don't care about it anymore? I mean, I get it hurts. And I get it. Like I have been through, I'm sure every fan has had that crisis that's put a bit of a question of why am I even watching this anymore?
Sure.
But see you next week.
Well, it's funny. Exactly. But it's funny too. Back before the internet, I used to go to the local drugstore in July or August, and I would open up the Street and Smith's magazine to see who was on the team. Right. So it's a little bit of it goes back to that a bit because you don't really know who's going to be on the team. A lot of these lighter fans, the ones who are not diehards, who are Notre Dame fans or Alabama fans, and they're like, oh, we want to see that Jones kid. I saw him last year. Looking forward to seeing him this year. Oh, he's playing for a different team this year. And there's somebody in his position who, we don't know who he is. So I think there's a little bit of that loss of connection. But the good thing is that, like I said, maybe it does go back to having that bit of mystery involved in who's going to be good, because you can look at these preseason, these predictions this year, and they haven't been very good, have they?
No, and it's funny too, by the way, you made me think of something too. I remember this has always percolated on the outside. We've always had, I mean, you and I both remember the Maurice Clarett saga, and it dragged in Mike Williams, the USC wide
Mm-hmm.
receiver, with it, arguably. There have always been players looking to get something out of it and move on. Used to be the NFL was the way.
Mm-hmm.
They used to, I thought, be unnecessarily punitive on players who wanted to transfer because you had to, unless you went down to division, you had to sit out a year. And I thought that's what I always thought. Like I get it, but that to me seemed a little too extreme. I think I get exactly what you're saying because I was that era too. Like you'd read the newspaper to find out who the good players were. You know, maybe you'd get that one program when you go to a game if you bought a program because even back then it
No
always seemed
programs
like really
anymore.
expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, and I get that. Like nowadays, when I hear about some of the fans, and I get some of the hardcore fans, I don't know if they care so much about the players as they just want to be able to win. But like, I mean, honestly, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, do you really know the? Oh, tell me about your quarterback's life. You know, and they go, well, you know, I just know we had a good
I don't.
quarterback, and now
I don't
now
know
they're at
though.
Miami or
You
something.
know, the thing is about that though. If it was just about winning, then it would just be I feel like there is an illusion that college sports there's an illusion that college sports offers the college sports fan. It's a fantasy, right? And I think this is the original attraction that people have to college sports, which is that the illusion is that these are kind of amateurs, right? These are
Right.
kind of normal
They
people. These
walk the same halls I
They
did.
walk the
You
same
know.
halls you did. They're in your local college town. You might see them over at Chick-fil-A drive through, depending on where you're at, right? And it's just it's an illusion. But it was something that appealed to a lot of people, this idea that this isn't the slick homogenized um money driven world of the NFL, for example, or a lot of other pro leagues, which is not to say that there was, I think people understood that there was money involved because all the TV contract, everything was still big even before all this, as far as the money goes. But I think there was this, people bought into the illusion of that. It's, I think, what separated the really hardcore college football fan from these NFL fans. It still kind of does. It's sort of like you feel like you're belonging to a special club in a sense, right? Like this is like you get it. Like you might like NFL, Mister, but I like college football because it's this, and there's the bands and there's the community and all this kind of stuff. And now, for better or for worse, a lot of that connection is being severed. You know, the lack of
It's
rivalry.
interesting.
You know,
Yeah, it's interesting you bring this up only because when we think about how college football was viewed a while ago, I'm talking 100 years ago, there was this concern that the players weren't really students. You know, they were these brutes. I mean, before Teddy Roosevelt
yeah.
forced college football to change the rules up, there was this concern that they weren't actually really students even then. They
Mm-hmm.
probably were less so then than they are now,
I'm sure. Yeah.
in certain ways. So I do wonder if we kind of, there's this sort of mystique, because you've talked about that. One of the great mystiques is that these students athletes are walking the same halls and doing the same things that I did back in the day when I went to, you know, the ivy covered, you know, halls of my
Mm-hmm.
old alma mater. But at the same time, I mean, it's always been a little different. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I hesitate to paint a broad brush because certainly there are many exceptions. Because I think when I crunched the numbers one time at all divisions of college football, every year there's over 43,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of them are quite normal and quite student. And I mean, I've taught my own share of college athletes, although granted, no college football players in my honors seminar. But I've had and not to say that they are qualified to do it. Let's be very clear there. I've interviewed my fair share of extremely smart college football players because those are the ones they like to trot out to
Right.
media days if they can. Some coaches.
Yeah.
But all of that said, I think you know that concern. I'm not. I wonder how much of it is the younger students have the younger generation has already seen that veil pierced.
Mm.
I wonder if they know that this is about money, this is about, in a way, what it always kind of was, which is, you know, college minor leagues. It's
Right.
football, you know, the NFL's minor leagues, because no matter what they try, nothing really entirely ever catches on enough. And how else are they going to train these players?
Yeah.
I mean, because
little more
basketball always felt.
cynical, a little more cynical, a
Yeah,
little
and
more
basketball was
realist.
always even more cynical. Like
Hmm.
especially when they forced the one and done rule, like they obligated someone to go and do a year. I think that really, I think basketball's always been past that point. Particularly back when we remember, Kevin Garnett, Kobe, people who just bypassed college
Yeah.
entirely when the NBA allowed it to go into the league. So I do wonder if college football fans have always a chunk of them have always maybe the chunk that held on to the mystique may have been smaller than we realized,
Hmm.
because clearly with all of these changes that have just brought to fore I mean, I love when people have talked about that. Like, remember when it was the money that was being, done under the table was in the thousands, and people were like, "Oh, that's outrageous." But then when suddenly market rates started to come out,
Hmm.
I mean, some people have pointed that out, like in some of the Southern teams that were masters of potentially, the bagmen, and sort of. I think I was listening to Godfrey, I think, who was the person who wrote that Meet the Bagman article. That was quite a great piece a long time ago. He was even talking about like those folks when the money actually started coming out, found the rich boosters that thought they were rich. There's actually people at Michigan who are married to the second richest person in the world, and suddenly, they really do want Underwood as their quarterback.
Right.
You know.
Right. I mean, it's funny. Like to me, it was definitely imperfect then, and now it's almost like a little bit of a analog to society writ large, where like once you realize the norms are just optional, that you could just kind of ditch them, and now it's just straight up. There's no more pussyfooting around on the topic. It's I would say 80% of media coverage I see is about NIL, transfer, media rights, conference changes, uh, and playoff uh, playoff ideas and stuff. And the percentage of actual coverage of the teams seems to be getting squished. And part of that's because a lot of teams, I think, because they're now these new money making, overt money making entities, they are buttoning up things like the old days. Like talk about USC, Pete Carroll used to have open practices. USC used to have open practices. There are like no open practices anymore. So not only are media not able to really watch the practices to see what's going on, you basically just have everything just being unveiled at the games, and you're just going to watch it and that's it. And it's just fascinating to me how that change has happened with very little. I guess there's some people protesting, but it seems to just be going, and people are just shrugging their shoulders about it.
Yeah, that's one of the great tragedies we've seen. It's a longer scale. I mean, the timeline is longer than just since COVID, but COVID really allowed an
Mm-hmm.
acceleration of that, and that's
Yeah.
the reduction of access. I mean, you know, obviously with public distancing and safety regulations that were installed, the access was reduced a great deal. But now I was talking to someone who, for example, just started covering some games for us, and they had a background in covering pro sports. I'm like, look, you just can't go in the locker room. You can't go after the game. Like, you're
Yeah.
good luck. Like it's a very carefully curated,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where again we were talking about that. Like the concern is, I hope they never decide like in there has to be some level of media coverage that at least has some objective nature to it,
Yeah.
unless you're just inviting influencers. But at the rate they're going, maybe that's all they want. They
Well,
want
they're
influencers who are just, it's like when the Marvel movies come out and they want the people that are just going to talk about how wonderful this latest Marvel movie is. Like, is that what you want out
it's
of college football?
it's fan service, right? The schools are doing
Yeah.
fan service, and they're doing
Oh,
their
can
own
I just say real quick,
influencing.
quick, 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 quick? I was at Big Ten Media Day, and I'm not going to say which team it is, but I was listening to a reporter ask questions that were like what? I think they stopped short of saying we.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just kind of like you're teeing up like this is like we're getting into what people don't like about certain political reporting. Like
Mm-hmm.
this has turned like I get it. It's college sports, and maybe there's been some people could argue that maybe politics has turned too much into what sports is about. But like on a sports level, like look, I know when it boils down to it, sports are not the most important thing in the universe. Like
Mm-hmm.
we can all agree on that. If you're a rational human being,
Sure.
you're not poisoning trees over sports or anything like that. But I mean, at the same time, though, can we at least treat it a little bit more seriously in terms of access and watching it erode is something that has been just. I don't think fans entirely see it happening. And I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, the money's big. I don't, the money part is what they get, it's easier to grasp. It's easier to understand, like, oh, then that's the biggest thing they'll deride. Like, I can't believe it's all about money at the expense of the Pac-12. Like it's all about money at the expense of this or the expense of that. But really, it's like we're actually seeing something a little bit more nefarious. We're seeing a lot of and I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to necessarily say there's malfeasance involved here, but it's this everybody keeps thinking that they're doing the right thing by reducing access, and that's
Hmm.
become a problem
Yeah.
in terms of coverage, in terms of, and part of it maybe it's a fear of the coach is now making so much money. I do not want to anger them. And some
Hmm.
athletic departments kowtow to the coach. Some don't. But it's hard to predict where it's going to go.
Yeah. But also, they also the every school now has their own content creation studio, so they don't want someone coming in and they want to do that story themselves. So they're fine with doing communicating with their fans themselves, and then on Saturday you see the game, and the idea, in theory, if you had too open practices or too much media coverage, then it's a distraction for the team. The team doesn't perform as well. That's the idea. And so ideally, fans should be like, oh, this is good. My team isn't being distracted. But on the other hand, where do they go? And I think that's why places like RCFB fills that gap we talked about. And then also, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was the rise of LLMs, large language models, in replacing, in a sense, Google search. Google search basically committing suicide over the last few years by just destroying their search function. And it's been revealed, and I think I also read that there's actually a deal between Reddit and ChatGPT. But when the LLMs go and train on, in this case, things like college football, they're relying on Reddit in many cases to provide the information that they're giving out to someone who's creating a query. And so my question for you is, how what's that like to know that you're not only servicing the current fans, but you're also potentially influencing what is the nature of perceived reality about something to do with college football?
Well, one of the I have really a lot of top thoughts on this, but I'll do my best to summarize them. It is a fascinating thing, and really, if you want the short backstory on that, there was actually a brief attempt at a lawsuit between Reddit and ChatGPT when they announced that we were basically using Reddit for all of our information. And can you imagine? Reddit was like, this is an untapped market,
Yeah.
So I get that. I mean, I'm not an employee of Reddit. I get it as a lawyer why they did that, and that's where the license came from. And I'm not shocked because I mean, for example, with RCFB, to the benefit of the larger public. Well, we were joking. We did some tests when we were getting ready to when I was getting ready to come here and talk to you, and we're trying to see, is it going to talk like a meme? Like, is it going to just use like, is ChatGPT going to use slang that only comes from RCFB? I didn't see that, thankfully. Um, but as you mentioned, RCFB is one of the not only one of the largest subreddits, but more importantly, during the season, we become one of the top 10 most commented. Because even
Mm.
though there are some sections of Reddit where you default when you create a Reddit account to being one of the subscribers, during the season, RCFB, more so than even our NFL or some of the what you think would be a bigger market, more people talk because I think there's so many more games going on and people comment. And I say that's an important part because the way these LLMs work is they take from the comments as much as anything.
Sure.
So there's an insane amount of content that
Hmm.
is being driven towards these devices that
Hmm.
they're pulling their opinions out of, to a benefit, I would say, probably for the public, because all in all, the overall conversation will get you a pretty, if they're sampling from RCFB, they're going to get a fairly rational, probably fan opinion. I'm not going to say you're going to get the best insight, although I actually was curious. I asked ChatGPT, why do you use a Reddit RCFB? And it was like, because, you get the voice of the fan. I get that. That's certainly an angle of it because there's so many of them on there. But you also get interesting insight. You get memes. You get, I was actually kind of impressed. That's when I got scared by the answer. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Like, yeah, you're right, robot, but is Skynet going to instead be a college football fan? I mean,
Wow. Yeah, a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, Bobak. Yeah.
but yeah, no, I mean, I'm not overly worried about it. I'm kind of all the sources they could be drawing from, other than mainstream media, I'm kind of glad it's us after them. Like, don't get me wrong, get it from like, please get it from the Athletic, Fox Sports, ESPN, any number of them,
Hmm.
any newspaper. But if you're looking for kind of filling in gaps and creating that substantive nature of the fuller picture, I mean, I'm happy they're looking to us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Heisman Trophy because this is the Heisman Trophy podcast. I my interactions with fans regarding the Heisman is there's typically, I think it's split the same way I think most things are, where you have this core group of traditionalists who are really interested in it, and the people who, if their team has a candidate, they get interested in it for a time, and then there's this group of like permanent cynics and snarkies who are just like, it just goes to the best player of the best team, and yeah. My favorite one is it doesn't mean what it used to mean anymore. Way back in like 1998 or something, like they go back like very short period of time, and how the Heisman has gotten worse since then. What's your opinion, or what's your impression, looking at your forum? What people's opinions are of the Heisman? What kind of discussions do they have? And is it seen as cringe? Is it seen as a still a valuable award? What's the picture like?
Well, I wouldn't say it's cringe at all. That it will definitely come through bright and clear if any part of college football goes that way. I think there is a concern that has it started to lessen a little bit in terms of its importance. I and part of this is I'm not sure how accurate that is, only because I don't know if my own bias is coming in here. Maybe it's because the Heisman was very good to my alma mater, but also
Mhm.
and then took one away and then gave it back.
Sure.
But but even then, like the one criticism I think has always been sort of understandable. I mean, last season notwithstanding, it tends to always go to the best offensive player on perhaps the most successful team. But that has been something that goes beyond, other than that one Notre Dame player, that's been.
Yeah.
I mean, I forgot his name. I
Paul
mean, the
Horning.
one who was
Paul
on the
Horning in
actual, yeah, Paul Horning, yeah,
'56. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. But beyond that, I think it's always been an important award, and I think people still do care because it is something. People have pride if their school got it. People care. I mean, obviously, John Mateer had an incredible performance against Michigan right before the weekend before we recorded this. So his stock is certainly up in the eyes of a lot of fans. People were really excited last year to watch the Heisman race and who it came down to. There have
Hmm.
been some. I remember in our CFB, those 2 years Stanford came in second place. Oh my goodness, we
Yeah.
had to deal with a lot of people that were upset,
Sure.
in those Heisman
Which
races.
is an
Toby Gerhart
amazing, which is
especially.
an
Yeah.
amazing thing, because to get Stanford fans riled up to the point where they're posting on message boards, it must be.
They had the neutral fan in their corner.
Oh,
That's where it got fascinating. Now I'm
got it.
not going to say like uniformly in their corner, but like that's where it got interesting. Then you see what people who aren't necessarily part of a specific school
Mm.
think about. Like Travis Hunter was such an exciting story last season, and people were really getting into them. But also, there were some other great quarterback. There were some great quarterbacks, and there were great players across the board. I mean, Cam Ward was certainly one of the better players in America, and I mean, I enjoy seeing that discussion. I'm really curious to see where it goes this season, because this season, I think more so than last season, really doesn't have. I mean, the preseason potential winners were a list that just sort of felt like, these seem like safe bets,
Yeah.
but there
The
isn't there isn't a returning player where everyone's like, oh,
the
there's a leader in
problem
the clubhouse.
the problem is that, again, the betting odds tend to dominate who is considered the front runner, when, as you might have remembered from my old website heismanpundit.com, there's actually sort of a variety of things that go into it that actually give someone a better chance to win. Someone like a John Mateer, for example, is positioned in a way that gives him a better chance to win, I would say, than someone who plays Rocco Becht for Iowa State, right? It's just one of those things. And my sense of the Heisman, in that maybe while college football changes, the Heisman can retain some of that traditional role, and maybe that's one of those things that the traditional driven fan can latch onto. Do you think that is something that the Heisman can kind of carve out for itself as we go forward?
I love that because the Heisman truly is something that is an unchanging institution that no matter what fans say, everyone would love one of their players to win.
Hmm.
Everyone would love one of their players to win. I don't care what university program, I don't care how many they have. If it's the first, incredible. I still remember, my gosh, when Baylor got their Heisman, like their fans were going absolutely
So crazy.
bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, and especially anyone who followed Baylor in the previous decades knew exactly how remarkable that was.
Yeah.
Now they're actually a solid team, and they've got a quarterback in the race, arguably now. So I
Hmm.
mean, I think it'll always be something. You're right. It's almost like a North Star. It's something you could set your watch to. The Heisman will be there. The Heisman will be the creme de la creme. No, I mean, there's plenty of great awards out there. Don't get me wrong, but the Heisman is it, and
Yeah.
I can't imagine an era where the Heisman isn't it. I mean, I'm sure the University of Chicago is still proud that they have one, even though
I
they're
think
now
it's still
D3.
I think it's still
Yeah,
sitting there in their athletic department, the original
bless their
trophy.
heart. I'm glad it is. I'm
Yeah.
glad it is. It should be. It should be. Darn it.
We should bring them back in the Big Ten like they used to be. They could be the Chicago Economists or something. But
Yeah,
well,
I always love the fact. I mean, one of my favorite pieces of trivia there is their old stadium was where they had the first sustained nuclear reaction.
that's right.
So and they did it without telling anybody. They did it like a
Yeah.
racquetball court.
Yeah.
But if you ever go to the campus, you know where the original stadium was because they built this statue, and that's actually how you know where the original U Chicago football stadium was, because they have a monument where they had done that reaction, and that was part of the stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the other good thing about the Heisman, I think that works in its case, is when your team is not in the championship hunt, like say Colorado last year, Boise was in the playoff, but long shot to win it all. You can cheer for your team, for your player to make it to New York. You can cheer for your player to win the Heisman. It's a proxy for cheering for your team, right? That's another thing that attracts people to it. Is that right?
One last takeaway I want for you though. So we all know the model for the Heisman Trophy was an NYU player. Where did they play?
NYU, I think they play at the Polo Grounds, I'm guessing.
They had a small stadium on the Bronx campus. That
Okay.
was where the football team was. It's now Bronx Community College because at one
Ah,
point NYU sold it and it became a community college campus. But I always found that fascinating. Like I love these kinds of little
mm-hmm.
trivia. Like again, where did I learn that? RCFB. I mean, because
Yeah.
that's the kind of little trivia that people love to kind of churn out there, and I find that stuff utterly fascinating.
Yeah. Now, if I wanted, now I've read RCFB, but I haven't posted on there. If I wanted to start posting on there, I can just start posting. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you just make a free Reddit account and start posting. That's no other restriction. We're still a completely free website, completely open. You don't even have to subscribe to comment or make a post. It just makes it easier and part of your normal Reddit feed. So you don't need I mean, some people use the app, some people use the website, some people do any number of ways to access it. We try to make it easy. You can also follow us on Twitter at Reddit CFB and Blue Sky and Instagram, and we have fun on all of those as well.
Now, you also do a podcast, right? Which is College Football Talk, where you have live, live
Yeah,
streams. Yeah.
yeah, I do that on it's funny. We actually started because Reddit tried to copy at the time Twitter and do like Reddit spaces that were like Twitter spaces,
Yeah.
and so we decided we'll try it. Within 2 shows we thought this is cool Reddit, but your system is broken, and they got rid of it eventually. So then we moved it over to Twitter. So yeah, no, it's a call-in show live every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern on our Reddit CFB on X. That's been fun. I've been trying to do it everywhere I can. I have hosted a show live from Ireland, Scotland, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Buenos Aires, Uruguay. Like when I'm on a trip, I just fun to talk college football.
Sure.
In
Yeah.
the off season, it's always good to just try to make it every time. I think only when I'm in Europe, I have to actually make it a little bit earlier because it ends up being like 3 a.m. But
Right.
you know,
Yeah. It's
but
always
my
tough.
family isn't thrilled when I'm like, Dad needs to just talk to some people.
Yeah. And that's always a challenge being in Europe and having to watch a game or get online and
Oh,
do something. Always a challenge.
yeah.
Bobak Ha'Eri, sports editor for RCFB, the Reddit subreddit that is probably, like they say, the internet tailgate, and the internet's tailgate, a great place for college football fans to talk shop, talk about the games, the players, make predictions, complain about things like college football fans are known to do. A really fun place. Thanks for coming on the show. And yeah, looking forward to seeing more from our CFB in the future.
Pleasure joining you, and we love the Heisman at our CFB.